Hi, welcome back to Detective Story. I'm Mike Hammond. Thanks a lot for joining in again. We're at episode 15. Again, I'm joined by my brother, Chris Kafcas. I appreciate him being here as always. We're going to go a little bit off the rails today in that we're going to discuss a case that really doesn't have any connection to Chicago, but it's very interesting and does have a connection to me and where I grew up. And I'm going to let Chris lead us into this. But I hope you'll enjoy it, and I hope that we can get some resolution to a case that is open and needs it. So thank you again. Chris, lead us in, brother.
Mike, we're talking about the what has been come to be known as the I-70 killer, correct?
Yep. Yes,
Starts off April 8th in 1992 with the first victim, Robin Fuldauer. Correct me if there's any family members that see this and I did not pronounce that name correctly. 26 years old, working at a Payless shoe store. I'm sure for like minimum wage. This is just it just seems harsh to me that life would end in like the back room of a Payless shoe store for really nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
This is the first of a series of shootings. I think there were 6 attributed to him with the same weapon along I-70, correct?
Yeah, that's why hence the name I-70 killer. They are relatively all along the I-70 corridor there.
And then there's a number of shootings they think may be related down in Texas, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
All right. So in 1992, we have the first shooting, April 8th, followed by a second shooting just days later. The first one is in
April 8th.
Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Second
right.
one is in Wichita, Kansas. And the third one, April 27th, is in Terre Haute. And a fourth one in Missouri, all around I-70. So we have April 8th, April 11th, April 27th, and May 3rd.
1992. Yep,
1992.
Yep.
And then there's a break back to Terre Haute, November 30th, 2001.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, it's a really kind of odd situation in that it's almost a spree killings in that, in about a week period, April 8th of 92, April 11th of 92, April 27th of 92, so a little more than a week, almost a month. But and then May 3rd of 92, covering a lot of territory.
A lot of territory. If you're watching TV, right, and they're talking about this series of crimes, this would be a pattern of escalation at this point, right? That he's so violent so often that what are the chances that he stops killing between May 3rd, 1992 and November 30th, 2001?
Yeah, I think it's unlikely. And as you discussed, there is these 3 cases. They're a little bit outliers. So, but to the point, the Robin Fuldauer in Indianapolis, Patricia Smith and Patricia Majors in Wichita, Michael McCown in Terre Haute, Nancy Kitzmiller in St. Charles, Missouri, and Billy Brosman in Terre Haute are all ballistically connected to a 22 semi-automatic pistol.
There's another connection, correct, in terms of the victims?
Correct.
All were petite women except for one man who, as they say, had a ponytail and may have been mistaken for a woman.
Yeah, he was allegedly a smaller guy who had a ponytail. If you're looking from the outside, could have been mistaken potentially as a woman. And
other similarities, they're all small stores, all stores where you wouldn't expect there to be a tremendous amount of cash, which led detectives to believe that robbery was not the primary motive here, that homicide was, correct?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with that because, Payless Shoe Store at the time was a pretty popular chain. So that, you know, potentially as an outlier, you think, well, okay, maybe he's hitting register there, but it doesn't look like the offender did. The other stores were like the one in Terre Haute. The first one in Terre Haute was a ceramic store, and that was actually on Wabash Avenue. So a little backstory here. I said I do have some connection to this. I was born and raised outside of Terre Haute. I went to college at Indiana State University. I'm really familiar with these areas, not so much Missouri, but certainly this part of Indiana, you know.
Right.
I grew up, I know all of this really well. So as an example, Wabash Avenue is not really on I-70. Wabash is a main drag that runs, you know, east and west through Terre Haute. It's kind of where the old downtown was. So if you saw Christmas Story, you know, the Thanksgiving parade and all that, that's what we would have on Wabash Avenue in Terre Haute when I was a kid. And that's probably 2 or 3 miles from I-70. So it's not far, but on the other hand, if it's a convenience killer jumping off the interstate, probably not going to wander that far off to do a crime like this, is my guess, unless you really know the area, you know what I mean? Also, kind of as we were discussing when we were researching this, the whole issue, it makes sense it's probably a truck driver, but I'm not sure about that even, because it's not all that convenient to be driving around in a big 18-wheeler.
Right, and you're pulling up in front of like a bridal shop in an 18-wheeler, unless he's parking that truck and walking.
Right.
But, I mean, staying at a hotel, as I understand it, they had a list of like 67,000 names of people that stayed in hotels in the area when these crimes happened.
Correct. Yeah, and which is, you know, that's kind of the proper way to go about this investigation. Now, I'm sure there are detectives, hopefully there are going to be detectives who worked on this. There's a lot of detectives who put a lot of effort and made these cases their life case, you know.
Right.
And if they hear this, I certainly hope they'll reach out to us. I'd love to talk to them in a, you know, kind of detective to detective to get their feel on it. But there's some interesting, like the whole, I'm sure they ran down that whole angle of the truck driver, you know, hard. But that 67,000 names you're talking about, that was just, they got a list together of everybody doing the big canvas.
Traffic stops,
hotels, everybody who might have been during that time period. And
let me ask you a question that kind of ties into the other episodes in terms of your background. So you have this first case, then the second case, then the third case, but they're all in different places, right? So initially they're being treated as individual crimes. How do they even come to see how do they come to see a pattern here? And two, once they do see a pattern, how does that change the course of the investigation? Or maybe not necessarily the course of the investigation, but how the investigation is done, or does it not change it at all?
Well, you know, to a degree, I think this is kind of old-timey detective work, you know, because had this been in recent years...
Could never happen these days, could it?
Well, it could happen, but what would happen would be, it would be all over the, you know, network news channels. By the second or third one, they would be like, there's a pattern, somebody's...
Right.
And everybody, every state trooper, everybody would be scouring, right? Back then, you know, there wasn't. Nobody really is just starting to get cell phones among the masses, and there was no computer in your pocket like we have now with everybody had access. So what happens very likely in this is, because of the proximity to the interstate, probably the detectives investigating this, once they realized pretty quickly that, hey, we may have an issue here with the proximity to the interstate. So they probably took it upon themselves to say, let's put out a bulletin and say, hey, we have this case. Maybe not the very first one, but by the second or third, they're probably saying, okay, look, we got these that are proximities. Anybody else have any? And then, you know, that's what coppers always would do back in the old days. I mean, where, you know, yeah, we got one actually that might match that. And then once they start putting their heads together and they have evidence from each one, shell casings or bullets recovered from the bodies, then they can do the ballistic comparisons, right? And if I'm not mistaken, 22 rounds a little bit tougher, but used to be that you couldn't put a 22 round into the database to get comparisons with other 22 rounds in there, just the nature of the bullet. Somebody will correct me on that, but that's my recollection. But what you can do always is if you have the actual bullet or shell casing from the scene, you can make direct comparisons, right? So that's how they're likely able to determine that these are connected, because they can do direct comparisons to the evidence recovered at each scene, you know, which also would make it a little complicated. Well, okay, so this guy only killed these. I mean, under that scenario that I just described, you would have to come to the table with the case. It's not like it's a 9mm where you put it into the database,
Right.
and any other evidence anywhere that is put in the database is going to hit on that weapon, you know.
Right.
So, I mean, there's just a lot of good detective work that went into this to connect them pretty quickly early on, you know.
So the probability is that during that period of time he was still killing. Just one, maybe not with that weapon, or two, those crimes have never been linked in with these other.
Correct. I mean, one of the big mysteries is this case, and the reason you'll hear them if you research this. You'll see, you know, there's the I-70 and I-35 thing, which was a little confusing to me because there's a whole separate section of murders down in Texas that the infamous Henry Lee Lucas was connected
Right.
to, that he admitted to, and then later, like, you know, he admitted to 300 some cases or something. And then they finally found out that no way he did all these, whatever. By the time he died or was executed, they think he maybe did 20 or whatever, something. But those cases are not at all connected to these.
Right.
There were 3 cases, though, in 93, 94, right? In
Texas.
2 right around Dallas, and one in Fort Worth, one in Arlington. And, here I got it in front of me. I'm sorry. Marianne Glasscock, 25 September 93 in Fort Worth. Amy Vess, November 1st, 93 in Arlington. Arlington's a suburb of Dallas there, kind of that Fort Worth, Dallas metropolitan area. And then in January, a couple of months later, 94 in Houston, Vicki Webb. Again, 3 women working in a small antique store, in a dancewear shop, and a gift shop, right? So now those also with 22, but ballistically not the same weapon as the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever the other 6 were. You know, on the cases are connected. So those. I don't know how the Dixon, Texas feel about those cases. They're connected by modus, MO,
Right.
but there's not an evidentiary connection, right? So, but again, the timing is so, mysterious with these, because you have the kind of spree things in 92. Within a month, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then actually 5, 6.
I mean, it just made sense to me now, because as I was looking at some stuff online, everybody was saying, on every website that I looked at, well, if it's the same guy, what happened to the gun? And the timing is, I mean, he kept that gun because he used it again in 2001.
You're right. So that is the thing, just so we're keeping our listeners up to what we're talking here, not getting too confusing here. One of the things that is odd and kind of funky about this is, you have these kind of spree-connected killings in 92, 93, and in nothing with that gun until 2001. Yet we, in late 93, the start of 94, 3 cases down there in Texas that are very close in kind of method of operation, but not ballistically connected. So it's a really confusing thing because you're like, okay, well, switch guns. It's still a
Right.
22. It's still a
Right.
22 handgun. Maybe he's got a couple of them, whatever, right? It's still, that kind of makes logical sense. But then he goes back in 2001, kills
And
the
uses
guy
the same gun.
in Terre Haute that he used in the original gun. So is he that careful, or is he?
Did he get locked up in the meantime? Right.
Could have been.
Or
Right.
is he just like in the Pacific Northwest driving around doing the same thing somewhere else and just never gets linked to?
Right. Yeah. I mean, this case is, although it's got some notoriety, and I think a lot of people are aware of it, it has not gotten the kind of notoriety that some of the serial killers who've been caught. People know me well are going to be laughing about this a little bit because I'm always got a little pushback with the whole serial killer thing because in the total number of murder serial killers make up a very, very small number, but they make up a whole lot of movies.
Right.
They make for great, pen to paper. But the truth is they're out there. They commit horrible crimes, and they are out there, but they get notoriety for a variety of reasons, usually after they get caught. And the FBI goes in and does their fancy little talking.
Also kind of plays into the randomness of it, right?
Right. There never seems to be a rhyme or reason to how they pick their victims. Sometimes there's a, whatever, but yeah, it does. It reaches out and kind of touches the everyman, and that scares everybody.
Primordial fear.
You're right, which is fair, certainly fair.
Fair enough.
But I do think that this I-70 thing didn't, because it's open, the killer's never been found or never been connected to these cases. Could be he's in custody or dead for something else.
Right.
But
there is in one of the cases, which I think there is video and DNA evidence on Billy Brossman, 2001. There is surveillance footage and DNA evidence, but unsure whether or not that DNA evidence was processed, or if it was processed, came up with no matches, obviously.
yeah, so I'm unclear on that. And as we, this is the first that we'll do on this, and we'll kind of conduct our own investigation and see what we can find out. And I'll try and tie that up a little better. But that strikes me as either they believe there potentially could be a DNA and it didn't turn out that there was, and or it is determined not to be probative, meaning it wasn't connected. Same thing. It's potential that it was never worked out, but I just find that hard
Right.
to believe. But I'll know more as we get a little further into this.
And then one of the shooting victims down in Texas survives.
Correct.
She is shot in the head. He actually has a conversation with her during the course of shopping around the store, and then, correct me if I'm wrong, like basically pulls his pistol and shoots her in the head. But because of an anomaly in her vertebrae was extra large, it didn't penetrate, and he laughs, or he goes to shoot her in the head. Again, the gun doesn't fire, and he laughs and just walks out.
Yeah. Right.
So makes me wonder if he's not getting these people disarmed with, talking with them while in the store, pretending like he's shopping,
Yep.
setting it up. If there's not a behavior pattern there that's part of the psychology of what he's doing.
Right, and that's a really good point. And I think that kind of building rapport could be a multitude of things. It could be that that's part of the thrill of it for him.
Right.
It could be that he's like scoping it, like you would do, a bank robber would do, to see, okay, who's around? Is there anybody else here? Let's be
Right.
sure there's no witnesses. I would like to introduce you to my friends over at Blue Knight Security Solutions, your ultimate partner in protection. Blue Knight Security Solutions isn't just your average check your ID at the door security company. They're a team of elite detectives, investigators, and law enforcement professionals with unparalleled expertise. Whether you need their real-world investigative prowess or securing your home, business, synagogue, church, or event, Blue Knight has you covered. From risk assessment to tailored security plans, hands, they'll ensure your safety. Blue Knight Security Solutions provides street-smart operators who can handle any situation. Contact Blue Knight Security Solutions today at 773-706-4920 or visit BlueKnightSecuritySolutions.com. BlueKnightSecuritySolutions.com. So with that thought process, it's really interesting to wonder how many times he attempted it and walked out because somebody else was there.
Circumstances weren't to his favor or his liking.
Correct.
It's interesting. You know, it's an interesting thing. We talk about this a lot in our conversations, just about awareness and distance. But with someone that's devious, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that part of it? Disarming someone to the point of allowing you to get close enough, letting your guard down.
It really is, because I mean that's the frightening thing about it, and worries everybody, is you can't be on all the time, especially if you're in the service industry, which you know better than anybody, right? Yeah. I mean, you can have a bad feeling somebody walks into your bar, but what are you going to do? You want to be good to everybody. You don't want to prejudge people. You want to be. And so, you also, I think a lot of times people will have a hard time entertaining their worst fears.
100%.
That goes back to what we talk about all the time. If something tells you a situation's not right, just trust yourself and believe it's not. Now, I'm not, we're not retroactively judging all these victims because, like you said, he's manipulating his way in.
I really think that has to be the case. And how many times in my own experience has a guy come in and been like a goof, Yeah. The hair on the back of my neck stands up, but he starts talking, seems normal, even seems like a nice guy, and all of a sudden, my back is turned and I'm doing something else, not paying attention to him, and that's really all it would take. That would be what his goal is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough because also, as far as I can tell from these, and we'll know more as we get further into this investigation, but it's not like these victims weren't found for a day or two. I mean, basically it was in and out. So even if they had a good, and I think a couple of these were true where, they had the people in the storefronts next to them or friends, hey, checking on them all the time. They know they're in there by themselves. They're not alone very long. But this character is able to get in and out. Now, we keep saying guy or man because, there are witnesses' accounts. There is a sketch out there of a potential suspect.
Right. 5'7" to 5'8", 5'6" to 5'8", like 140 to 160 pounds. Sandy blonde hair with reddish tint, right?
Yep, white dude by all accounts. So that we have it's not like it is a ghost or that we just have no idea. There's pretty good, but by the time they put a sketch out there, they've got a pretty good feel that they have an idea of what a good description of the killer.
Is there a danger in putting a sketch out to the public?
It's calculated risk, but usually by the time you do that, it's worth the risk because you're just hoping. And those sketches can be, it's kind of a open joke, right? Those sketches can vary to be like, I mean, I've had sketches where we get the killer like, whoa, that's pretty damn accurate. And then we've had some where that could be Bart Simpson.
It looks like a stick figure.
Right. Like I drew it, you know what I mean? So it's really tough, not to, again, it sounds like I'm always apologizing. I don't mean to make fun of sketch artists. They're very good at what they do, but they're limited by the information they're given.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if you gave them a picture and said, draw a picture, they'd draw a picture and make you look like a photograph. They're good at what they do. It's just that,
they're going with what they have.
Right. And trying to and that's why you don't do, as a detective, you don't really want to sketch until you have a pretty good idea of what this is going to look like, and you've got a witness saying, I can picture him in my head, and then what you're hoping for is somebody's going to look at that and say, holy shit, that's Uncle Joe, or whatever.
And there's a retired detective that still kind of working the case, right?
There's several of these, and we'll reach out to them. But there are, and if they hear this and they're interested, please reach out to me. Mike at detectivestory.net is always the best way. There are 3 or 4 detectives across the country who basically dedicated their lives to this. I mean, they want answers. And, you can feel that as the episode that's coming out next with Bobby Rodriguez. I mean, our listeners will be able to feel that.
Yeah.
That desire of his to get answers, and so I'm sure that
I think that's one of the. I think that's one of the most intense things. The desire to get answers, to give the family closure, to give the survivors, the families. I don't think closure is the right word, right?
It's not. That's a tough word, but I think you could argue it closes a door, or
right.
But closure is too strong for what that is, because it never really brings closure to all that pain. In
right.
That. But for in the generic sense, or the wide,
it does
sense.
provide a what and maybe a why. How, what, and maybe a why.
Yeah, right.
Which
right.
I know from personal experience, it's valuable.
Yeah.
It has meaning.
Of course. I mean, particularly with Elizabeth Veloz, we talked about it in episode 14. She's just never been found, and so that's just really hard on a family.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
And you can tell with Bobby that's his. That priority one is to find her. So even if she is deceased, just to find her. And in this case, these I-70 things, you can imagine the families this kind of, really random act is got to be super tough, right? Because you go to work one day, everything's fine,
and that's it.
It's it, and no answers again, So.
Yeah, I mean, that first one, Robin, is 1992, 26 years old. Would place her born in 1966? Same age as us, Think about all the life that we've had in between now and 1992. It's a staggering loss.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah. And, somebody that commits these crimes is, very, very dangerous. And that's why I'm sure these detectives have, lived and breathed this case several years, their entire life, because I'm sure they believe very likely this can't be it unless he was, in custody during those time periods. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that, there could be these gaps, but one of the reasons it's unlikely is that he I decided I'm not going to kill for a few years. You know what I mean? It doesn't.
No, that doesn't track. Especially not after the. It's like 4 shootings in 2 months.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. My impression with the phrase serial killer was always that it was sex related. That serial killing was a sex crime. But that's not the case.
No, it's not really the case. I mean, it can be. I think that's more common than not, but it's not necessarily the case. I mean, Son of Sam's a good example. I think
Right.
of somebody who there wasn't a direct sexual component, maybe indirect, and then he was attacking couples or whatever. It could be indirect with this. Maybe the guy has a sexual issue with women of
Right.
a certain look or whatever, but there's no sexual component to the actual crime, and that's not particularly uncommon.
And as far as the MO of the stores, and really the first thing that pops off in my mind is that these are all easy targets, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, the first one is a bit the anomaly, right? Because Payless shoe stores were, I think they're still around, right?
Yeah.
They're chains. They're generally, especially at Pendleton Pike in Indianapolis, back then, I think even now, is a pretty busy thoroughfare. So the chances of walking in there and not having another employee there, or not
Right.
having another customer there, are that's risky if you're you're the killer there, right? As compared to the others, which are apparently, kind of mom and pop type antique stores, boutique stores, things like that, which are maybe going to go long periods during the day where, they don't have customers come in and you don't have to watch those very long. But having said all that, even as I'm talking through it in my head, it does seem like we spent some time scoping these out. You know what I mean?
Like he's got to be at least watching enough to see who's going in and out for a short period of time. I mean, on that first one, he's actually, as he's walking out, a woman and her child are walking in, right? This guy's a savage, man. Just a straight up savage.
Yeah, for sure. And the goal with this is always, he shouldn't sleep a peaceful day. You know what I mean? Now, you make the argument, whatever, and I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, but you can make the argument, of course, that he's sociopath, that he's not really thinking too much about us trailing him all these years. But whatever, that's not our concern. Our concern is that, he never sleeps a peaceful day if we can keep the name out there, keep looking, keep hunting him. Now, it could easily be that that the person is dead, but, don't accept that as an answer until you know it's true, So.
Yeah. So what happens with a case like this moving forward over an extended period of time?
Yeah, so what happens, the detectives assigned, like I said, are going to be there. When you're assigned to something like this, you just don't let it go. You're going to continue, even if you retire, you're going to continue to push, and you're going to continue to keep word out. And I know a couple of these detectives have done interviews, they've talked to the press, and so what we hope to do with this is keep the awareness alive by doing this, you and I. And then this is just an introductory episode for us. We're gonna reach out to the people involved and see if they want to be involved. And then I think the best way to get to an answer is to make it a collaborative, and say, okay, what do we got? Let's put the word out. Let's find out who did it. Things do shake. I mean, they just do after years. It's really hard for people to keep things silent. It's hard to. Somebody knows something.
It has to be. What do you think the chances of this guy doing all this and not shooting his mouth off in a tavern at some point?
Well, I think you're lucky if that happens. You know what I mean? Because a sociopath like that's probably not going around bragging about it. You never know. I think that if somebody's in a tavern, they say I'm the I-70 killer. Like, well, if it's if it's Joe the bar. The regular at the bar, but he's like, he's always this guy who's also killed Kennedy, whatever, But in general, somebody just says that, somebody's gonna think, it might be, or at least call somebody or put some word out, But I think that the strong possibility exists. He's a one-off loner type guy and maybe has a family, and that's a whole second life. You do find that, and then. So that word of mouth is not as strong, but that's not to say somebody doesn't know something. I think somebody's out there.
Gotta think he's a trucker.
Yeah. Well, it would make the most sense. But again, though, there are some caveats to that, right? Because is he a trucker that? I mean, like you said at the start of this, somebody's not going to notice it. Well, I do remember, right after I do recall a big semi pulling. It just seems,
especially now that you mention it, on the one on Wabash Avenue in Terre Haute. I mean, 18-wheeler parked somewhere there is just, and then coincidentally a homicide. Someone's going to take note of that.
Right, and one of the things that we need to find out is if we can get the people involved in this to discuss it with us is what were the time frames? How and some of this is probably noted and we glossed over it trying to get this together, but how long after the event happened was the victim discovered, things like that, but what you're getting at is correct. If somebody hears shots and then goes to check and finds the victim deceased, it seems really unlikely somebody's not going to say, I just heard this big pickup or this big semi truck leaving.
Right.
I don't want to discount it, but it just seems kind of strains at credulity.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. The first one, he's in and out in under 20 minutes. One, he's walking around the store,
Yeah.
Grabbing stuff. This dude's a savage.
Yeah, right. And again, with all that, now look, our listeners and my friends who are detectives and that are listening to this, chime in, give us a ring, because we're kind of tossing this around, you and I, out loud here, as we haven't done a deep dive. My sister, who's our great resource officer on this, who does a lot of our research, has really done a deep dive on this, and she kind of provided all of this, Kari, and we appreciate her help always. But we're kind of talking out loud with this to get this going. So any of our listeners have an opinion or think, hey, you're missing this obvious thing, especially if you're involved in the investigation, please reach out. We don't want to be right. We want to get answers, So off my soapbox there. Go ahead.
I'm looking at it, and just to go back to an earlier point that we were kind of making. He is deliberately. It looks like he's deliberately spending time in the store to manipulate, disarm, and then commit a tremendous act of violence, which just a stone cold savage. I'm trying to picture in my head the psychology of someone that could look another person in the eye, talk to him about an antique, and then when they turn their back, shoot him in the head.
Yeah, right. No, it's good. It's a good question, and maybe we find us, a forensic psychologist might give us some idea what they think on that. But again, there's a practical application to that. They're walking, and maybe he may have walked in 100 stores and decided this isn't the one.
No.
I'm not getting away with this.
This is an easy soft target.
Right. The component that makes it troubling, is that they are not for profit,
right,
type situation.
He's taking a couple $100, whatever.
At most.
At most.
Yeah, this is not. It's certainly, looking at it strictly from a robbery standpoint, it's a low risk kind of endeavor, right? Because you've scoped out a little bit. It's a person in there by themselves. You can get in and get out. It's kind of a little bit remote. You have access to the highways. But the reward end is just so. What are you going to? I mean, that's worse than robbing a bank. Our listeners don't know, robbing a bank's not the way to get money. Right. The average tank on a bank robbery is about $1,200 or something. So the risk reward is just ridiculously low. So. And this is the other way. The risk is lower potentially, but the payout is just nothing.
Right.
Really. You know what I mean? Like
this seems to me, my uninformed opinion, based on just knowing some savages. This is like thrill killing. Like, he gets off on it. He's doing this for the thrill of murder, and he hits those, which makes me think that there's just either something stopped him for that period of time and he started again, or he was doing it somewhere else.
Yeah, agreed. Because the other option is, maybe it's a drug addiction induced thing, but this doesn't have any of those earmarks, right? I mean, that's you. If you're going to do that because you need $10 for a hit, you're just going to stick somebody up on the street.
Yeah.
You're going to hit liquor store. You're going to hit cash in and out. You're not going to put the time. You're right.
No.
I mean, this has all the earmarks of somebody who is getting a thrill from doing this.
Yeah.
So, agreed with you on that.
So what now?
Well, next, I think, what we'll do, I think we've covered the basics of this, and anything we've missed, we'll revisit. I think next for us is to, do some detective work. Reach out to some of the people involved and roundtable this and see, what is next? What can we get? I just spoke to a person I'll reach out to again who has a algorithm that they're very proud of and that believes that they can get somewhere with series of murders. And okay, I'll reach out and say, how about how do you feel about taking 67,000 names and putting it in that algorithm? You know what I mean?
Right.
We'll just start to work it like it's a case and try and talk to the people that really know it and get their feelings about what direction it should go next, and take it from there. I think we can figure it out. Not we, I mean me and you, but I think in the collective with all these great detectives who've done work on it, the people that are interested in it, I think this is a solvable situation.
I mean, it's kind of a daunting task for those initial investigators looking at it in the broader picture, right? Even with those 67,000 names, chances are it's the I-70 killer. He commits the crime, gets on the interstate, and drives to another town and right? What are the chances of him staying the night in Terre Haute by the store? I suppose anything is possible, right? But
yeah, you don't know, and we gotta. This has probably been opined exhaustively by all these people that worked it, so we'll catch up to speed with that. I'm always confident with this. It's like David Mamet says, right? If something's moving, somebody's got to be moving it, and that's just the truth. I mean, somebody knows.
Yeah.
And this is not 1955, and we got cases that I think we can get answers to from 1955. This is the 90s. People are alive. People know something, and the fact that he was so spread out makes it difficult. But the fact that he committed a multitude in similar fashion does give us a door.
All right.
Right. Thanks, brother.
Yeah, you
I
got it.
appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the time as always. And we'll keep you up to date. We'll keep rolling with it, and we'll let you know how it shakes. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. We
Be
appreciate
careful.
it.